The courtroom fell silent as Ibrahim Traoré, the young and fiery Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, strode into the chamber wearing his military uniform. His boots echoed in the vast marble hall, a defiant march that had the world holding its breath. The judge's gavel slammed down with a crack, the air thick with tension. The judge's voice rang out, "You are fined for disrespecting this court's order. Remove your military attire immediately." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but Ibrahim did not flinch. What came next would shake the very foundation of global politics and transform this courtroom into the stage for a historic showdown. Introduction and setup. It was a bright morning in the heart of Paris, the city of lights. The atmosphere in the courtroom felt heavier than the usual tension that surrounded high-profile political cases. The eyes of the world were on this event, not just because it involved the young and controversial leader of Burkina Faso, but because of his attire, a stark contrast to the somber suits and robes of those around him. The military fatigues he wore were more than just a uniform. They were a symbol of defiance, strength, and an unyielding commitment to his people. The courtroom was cold and sterile, with polished wood surfaces reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting above. A few hushed whispers passed between journalists, all too aware that this moment could become a defining moment in global diplomacy. Behind the bench, the judge, a man well versed in the formalities of law, did not mask his discomfort. His eyes, sharp and calculating, studied Ibrahim as though he were an enemy, but Ibrahim remained unfazed. The weight of his country, of his people, rested upon his broad shoulders. As Ibrahim stood tall, his gaze remained unbroken, fixed on the judge. His life had been anything but conventional. A soldier, a revolutionary, and now, the leader of a nation at the crossroads of history. His every move was scrutinized, his every word dissected. Yet, today, he was not the politician making deals behind closed doors. He was a man who had risen from the ashes of colonial oppression and economic hardship to lead his people with unwavering resolve. "I do not come here as a man in uniform," Ibrahim began, his voice steady but carrying an undeniable weight. "I come as a representative of my people. This uniform is not a sign of disrespect, but a call to action. A call to the world to understand that we as Africans have a right to stand tall, to defend our sovereignty, and to demand respect." Conflict or challenge. Introduced. The judge, visibly uncomfortable, shifted in his seat. "Your presence in this court is a privilege, not a right," he said, his tone cutting. "You will not wear military attire in this courtroom. Do you understand?" The words hung in the air like a charged storm cloud. The world outside had been watching, and now they were listening. Ibrahim's decision to wear military attire was no accident. It was an audacious statement, a challenge to the colonial powers that had long held sway over the continent. His refusal to bow to the expected norms of diplomacy had earned him both admiration and disdain. But now, in this foreign courtroom, the tension reached a boiling point. "I am not here to play by their rules," Ibrahim replied calmly. "I am here to change them. For too long we have been told what to wear, how to speak, how to think. Today I stand here not as a servant to the West, but as a servant to my people." As the words left his lips, the courtroom was engulfed in a deafening silence. His statement had struck a chord deep within the hearts of those who had been oppressed for centuries. To some, Ibrahim was a hero. To others, he was a threat. A murmur spread through the crowd, the whispers of the journalists and the international observers vibrating through the room. Some were calling for his arrest, others were praising his bravery. But in this moment, the true battle had just begun. Midpoint revelation or twist. As the tension mounted, the judge's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the papers in front of him. He was unsure how to proceed. This was no ordinary case, and Ibrahim was no ordinary man. The Western powers had already been rattled by Ibrahim's rise to power and his outspoken condemnation of the old systems of influence. But just as the judge was about to issue his verdict, something unexpected happened. A young lawyer from the back of the courtroom stood up. He wasn't part of the defense, but his voice carried the weight of 1,000 generations. Ibrahim Traoré is not just a politician, the lawyer said, his voice echoing through the room. He is the embodiment of Africa's awakening. For too long we have been shackled by the chains of Western dominance. His defiance is not against you, Your Honor. It is against a system that has long disrespected Africa's autonomy. Courtroom fell still, the words reverberating off the walls. The judge froze. For a brief moment, time stood still. Climax, emotional breakthrough. The room was on the edge of eruption. The judge, in an act of frustration, slammed his gavel down. "You are fined for this disruption," he declared. "Remove your military. Attire or face further consequences." But Ibrahim stood tall, unwavering. The judge's words seemed to hang in the air like empty threats, incapable of reaching the core of Ibrahim's resolve. He was no longer just a man in military fatigues. He was a symbol, a force. As he stood there, his eyes locked on the judge, it was clear that the real battle wasn't about what he wore. It was about the power to define one's own identity. Then, unexpectedly, a senior diplomat from a powerful African nation rose from his seat, stepping forward to speak. "Your Honor, we ask that you reconsider your actions," he said, his voice calm but firm. Ibrahim Traoré's actions speak for millions of Africans who have lived under oppression for far too long. If you proceed with this fine, you will be sending a message to the world that Africa's sovereignty is still for sale. The words struck like lightning. The room seemed to tremble with the weight of the statement. The judge hesitated. What had once seemed like a routine case now carried the echoes of a larger struggle. Was this about the military uniform? Or was this about the power to define the future? Resolution and quiet closure. The judge, after what seemed like an eternity, stood in silence. His gavel lay still on the desk, the weight of his decision too heavy to lift. In that moment he realized that the world was watching. Was he going to uphold the traditions of a system that had long silenced those who dared speak out? Or would he acknowledge the change that was sweeping across the world? After a long pause, the judge's voice broke the silence. "I am withdrawing the fine. You may keep your attire, Mr. Traoré." The tension that had gripped the room suddenly lifted, and for a brief moment, the air felt lighter. Ibrahim's gaze softened. He had won, not just the case, but a symbolic victory for all those who had ever been silenced. The world watched as Ibrahim Traoré walked out of the courtroom, not as a man who had been forced to conform, but as a leader who had defined his own path. His uniform was no longer just fabric. It was a banner of defiance, a beacon for all who sought freedom and justice. Call to action. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing for more inspiring tales of courage, defiance, and the power of standing tall against all odds. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs to see it today, and join us in spreading hope and change.